Folks, I want to talk a little bit today about the Delta Electric Corporation. They had their headquarters and manufacturing in Marion, Indiana for a number of years, and I believe they started somewhere in the neighborhood of 1913, and most of the bicycle components were built between 1913 and 1965 when the company sold, and they started manufacturing some other products at that time in that same facility. So what we're going to talk about today basically is the horns, and I'll touch a little bit on the headlights, but wanted to set this video up primarily about the horns. When I was working on these horns, I really couldn't find anything, any instructional content on the web about them, and so I thought, well, I've developed a little bit of knowledge about it. I thought maybe I would share it with you folks. So some of the horns that you see laying here are, from various styles, but I gathered some stuff here to kind of show some different styles of horns. Same mechanism, however, they accept a different battery size. This is out of a 1940s Hawthorne bicycle. It takes a 6-volt battery, like the one you see here. This would go in there. Of course, you've got your horn switch on the side, and you can see the little Delta insignia here. You'll see that on several of the components. A little difficult to see here, but has that little almost diamond shape on it. And then, of course, the Delta name is right here on the horn. Some of them do not have the name embossed on the horn. Not sure if these are earlier or later. My guess would be they were later because, they wanted to take some cost out of it. But a lot of them have this nice Delta embossed name right on the horn. So that's the 6-volt version. Also a 6-volt version this is actually off of a pre-war, I believe this to be about 1940 or 1941, Hawthorne bicycle. It actually accepts 4 D-cell batteries, which develops 6.5 volts, so it would also be a 6-volt system. Here is that same setup in a ladies' tank from same time period. I believe this is a Roadmaster tank. You can see the Delta insignia here, and this is the earlier pre-war version of the switch there. I'll talk a little bit about that here after a bit. And here is a horn developed for the some of the Monarchs took this style of button that is on top of the tank. This particular one here is off of J.C. Higgins, a 1950-51 J.C. Higgins girls color flow bicycle. It only took 2 D-cell batteries, and the horn button again is on the top instead of on the side. This version here is fairly common. This is a 2-cell size, and this was in a pretty much a standard item in a Schwinn post-war late 1940s, early 1950s. As you can see, the buttons on the side here. It works. So what I'm going to talk about is when I find these horns, many times they do not work. A lot of times, for this horn, for example, when I hooked it up to the battery, there was absolutely no sound. And I believe that the coil is bad in this. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the construction of these. I have one apart here so that you can see how they are made. and understand a little bit about, you know, what I do when I get it working. So they have these little nubbins pressed over here to hold this all together. If you push those out carefully, you want to make sure you don't push them too far or you'll break them off like I did this one. But you can open this up and see the insides of it. The way this horn works, it's actually, I believe it's Faraday's law that, and you can Google that, it's Faraday, is it works similar to the way a speaker works, where there's coils wound around a pole, and when you put the electric to it, it creates a vibration which actually moves this up and down, which vibrates this, which creates the noise in the horn. And, you know, it's a very simple, you know, product here, but, you know, it's really cool that something that was built in the 40s, you know, and this is 2015, this stuff still works. It's pretty amazing. So anyway, as I mentioned, some of them you'll hook the electric up to them and you get no sound. Others, you may hook the electric up to them and you get a little bit of sound. And when you hear that, when you get that sound, know that you can get this horn to make noise by taking it apart, cleaning it out. I have taken some apart and I'll find where like moths have built nests in them. There's, you know, various debris in them, maybe spider nests, whatever. You can look for broken wires or something like that to, you know, repair. But for the most part, I've taken them apart and cleaned them out and put them back together and they work fine. One of the things that you want to do is check this little adjuster here, which actually, this screw right here, actually adjusts the height of this, which this is the portion that ends up vibrating and tapping against this to make the horn sound. So what you're adjusting here is the height of this, and you want to make sure that it touches this just in the right amount to get the most noise out of the horn. So that's what that's about. This center screw basically is used for the mounting, but as you can see, as I have this hooked up here, it's actually the negative pole, and then the positive pole I have hooked to the wire. So that is the demonstration of the horn that makes noise but doesn't blow. Okay, and then we also have the horns that do make noise. This is one that I had apart, and it actually is marked that it's a 6 volt. You can see the 6V on here. That is actually one out of a unit like that. That's why I'm using the 6 volt battery on it. And we'll just test it out here to see if it's going to work. And we'll try it out here. Maybe this isn't one that there we go. So there's the horn test, and now we'll talk a little bit about some of the later. Here's a later horn here, same principle. But this would be from a mid to late 50s to early 60s horn. And then some of the smaller, just horn alone, battery operated horns that you could buy when I was a kid in the early 70s would have had this style of horn. So Delta Electric Corporation built a lot of different components for these, and also marketed entire light systems for them. This would have been the actual light that was used in this. This is like a 6-volt tractor light, and it actually plugs into the bottom of a tank like this. And you have the components in there, the connectors that go right to the battery and run this type of a light. They also made, for that same style light, a battery canister that you could buy, and it actually mounted right to the frame of your bicycle, and the battery went inside this canister here, and you would have a light like this that mounted on your handlebars. And it actually threw a really good beam of light, same as what a 6-volt tractor light would have been back in the day. This would have been a premium light to have on your bicycle and actually have it throw enough light to actually work. Some of the switches and stuff I wanted to mention about this as well. The simplicity of them and how repairable they are. Here's the pre-war switch, that the horn button that came with this particular tank, and it is the same button. This is pre-war. It's a pre-war button, same button that's on this particular tank. These were made of brass. You can see that it's made of brass. I've seen some that I believe during the war, after 1941, when America started into the war, some of these components then were made of steel. And my thoughts are probably the brass went to make shell casings, and they weren't allowed to use the brass on bicycle components. Just my thoughts. I don't really know that to be certain, but that's what I would assume. This little Bakelite back here goes inside, and as you can see, it's staked on 3 sides of that horn, actually 4 sides of the horn button, to hold that Bakelite piece in there. But these 2 brass posts go in through that Bakelite piece out to the front here, and when you press the button, of course, it connects those 2 poles together, and then you get your continuity. It sends a charge to the horn and makes the horn blow. Kind of a very, very simple, but very effective design. I wanted to mention that when this horn button came to me, I bought this tank on eBay for a bike that I'm putting together. This was not working. It was solid. It was froze down like that. I took it apart and found that the spring inside was broken. I went to the hardware and bought a spring that fit pretty closely to what I needed. I had to trim it and bend it a little bit and make it work. But now I have a pre-war working horn button for my pre-war bicycle, and I'm pretty excited about that. Here's a later version. This is off of this style of button. You can see how they have it connected on the side there. Same thing. This was not working. The spring was collapsed inside. I bent these little tabs back very carefully so that I didn't break them off. I cleaned it all out inside, cleaned up the contacts, put it back together, and then I was able to check the continuity. And we'll do that here. We'll just do a little quick test on this. I bought some alligator clips at the hardware, made these little short test cords. I was having trouble. My continuity tester has these poles on it, and sometimes it's hard when you don't have only having 2 hands is not enough sometimes. So I built these little connectors, and they work. They're very, very effective. So here I'm going to press the button and see if we can get continuity, and we do have continuity, and that tells me that the button is working. So that was a nice little success story there. Here's the pre-war headlight switch that goes in the bottom of this tank. Again, as you can see, there's the Delta logo on it. All of these things have the Delta logo on them. Very cool stuff. This light has the poles that go through to the top, and of course there's a little connector on there, and when you slide it in the one direction, it gives you the continuity you need to turn on the headlight. I had to take this all apart, put a new spring in it, and clean it up and put it back together, and it works beautifully. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I hope you get some good information out of this. Oh, here's another Delta light. This is for my pre-war bicycle. This doesn't have the correct lens in it. I had to cut this and put this lens in there. But this is an example of the 6-volt light, the pre-war 6-volt light that was used on these early bicycles, 1930s, very early. I believe this is a 1941 bicycle, and it's just trying to provide some information for folks as they're looking at stuff and they see bike parts and trying to find replacement parts or working parts. Just know that some of those parts that right now don't work could maybe be taken apart and repaired, just with a little bit of knowledge like this, to know that it is possible to repair these things and put them back together and have them work. I think it's really cool to have something that's ride down the trail on a bicycle that's 75 years old, and a lot of folks are just riding around on their newer bikes, and it's great to be out there exercising with your family. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. See you all sometime soon, and hopefully some other instructional bicycle video that I produce.